So as I said, we're going to look at list views, menus, and context menus today. List views in sort of the early stages of Android were a way of showing a list of data. There is actually something called Recycler View, which we'll cover later, which is a better way. But a list view is a good way of kind of getting started and learning the basics of how we can create lists. To do that, we have to use something called an array adapter. We're only going to sort of touch on that. We'll use it and see how it works. And we'll also discover something called the late init keyword, which gets us around some of the problems we have with Kotlin's null safety when we don't have the ability to use like an initializer or constructor in a class to set something up. And then we'll go on and look at both menus and like context menus, where it's where you hold your finger down, you can get like a right-click option. So with a list view, typically if we've got some sort of collection of things, often strings, but maybe there might be other things, we sometimes want to display them in some sort of a list for the user, okay? And we can do that with something called a list view. The list view has something called an adapter, which is designed to sort of convert the information that's in the list into something that can be like our collection, like a mutable list or an array list, into the sort of list on screen. So in its simplest form, we can basically create an array adapter and give it a list of strings. If we want to do anything more complicated, like have a list of something of different types, like if we had anything more complex than a list of strings, like a list of employees or something, and we wanted to show sort of more than one piece of string in one string in the list, then we have to do some like subclassing. We won't really touch on that in the context of a list view, because that would be kind of doing things that we'd want to do in a recycler view anyway, and a recycler view is a better way of doing it. So we'll touch on that later in the year, but we'll get a sort of hang of a list view now. One of the reasons a recycler view might be better is because a recycler view is much more efficient at handling when we add and remove things from the list. It's quite good at that, whereas a list view is not particularly efficient at doing that. So what we'll do, we'll create a new project and we'll kind of jump back and forward between the slides. I'm going to create we're going to create a simple kind of stopwatch application. So all it's going to do is like allow us to like count the amount of time that's elapsed in seconds and milliseconds. And we'll use API 14 like we've done before. But rather than start with an empty activity, I'm going to use a basic activity because it gives us this kind of like app bar thing with like a menu. You can see there's kind of like the 3 dots up here. That gives us a menu. And it also gives this little button, which is called like a floating action button. And we're going to use that button. You don't have to keep the button. You can delete it if you don't want it, but it's kind of useful for our stopwatch. So I'm going to hit next. And I'm going to create a main activity with the usual name. So we'll get a project set up. We'll just give it a chance to build. It's slightly different from a regular project in that we have kind of 2 XML files. So in the Java, we've just got this main activity. But if we look at our resources in layout, we've got our main activity XML. And that's got this like app bar layout and a toolbar. And a floating action button, and then it includes another layout file, which is this content.main. And if we look at content.main, that's currently got a text view in it. It might make a bit more sense if we look at the design for it. Let's give a bit more space. So they kind of look the same if we jump to the design here, except that this thing in the middle is like a content. The content. This include content main. So we'll add our list view to this content one. And our floating action button, although we can see it here, that actually belongs in the activity. Okay, you'll see that is, where's it gone? Here, floating action button. Okay, so, and this kind of floats on top of other things. And in this particular instance, it's set up with this like email drawable logo. I think we kind of want maybe like a plus. So let's see what else is there. Let's try input add, see what that does. See if that looks a bit more appropriate. Yeah, we've got a plus button now, so that's a bit better. Okay, so let's get our list view into our content. So let's get rid of our text view. So I mentioned that recycler view is a better way of doing it. As a result, it's kind of replaced list view. So list view sits in the kind of legacy category, okay? Along with things like some of those layouts that we talked about that have been replaced by constraint layout. So I'll drag in my list view. We'll pop it in. It will fill most of the way, but that isn't quite right. It's given it a fixed width and height. What we really want is it to match parent. I don't know why it never gives me match parent on here, but I'll go into the text option and it's messing up the layout again, but we will set the disable notification. There we go. We want to set the width to match parent and the height to match parent. We don't really need any margins. We're not interested in how it's positioned. This is like how the layout editor should show it, but if we get rid of that, it should like pick it up from match parent, and it's constrained to the start and end, which is the left and right. And there we go. That's filling up the thing. Let's give it an ID as well. Let's call it list view for now. Okay. And there's our list view. And if we go to activity, even though it's in our content, we can still do things like should still be able to do like list view. It will add that import for content main, and then we can do things with it. Okay. And what we really need to do is give it an array adapter, which I think is its adapter property, but we haven't really configured that yet, so we'll come back to that in a minute. Okay, let's just jump back to the slides for a minute. So a list view is pretty easy to set up. We just drag it on. Now, the array adapter basically allows us to specify what collection of things it's going to show. It has some predefined layouts. Okay, we could create our own layouts, but that will require quite a lot of customization. We'd have to like subclass our array adapter and other things. So for now, we use a text view. And as I say, if we want to do more complex layouts, chances are we want to use a recycler view anyway. So as I say, we're not going to waste too much time looking at all the more complexities of it. Yeah, so let's actually try it out in practice, because it's all well and good like reading about it, but it makes more sense when we have a look. Okay, so we're going to need some sort of collection of items. So let's create a collection of items. Okay, in our class. So let's say we're going to have it's going to be like a stopwatch activity. So I'm going to have a list of times. Okay, these are going to be formatted as like seconds and milliseconds. So and because it works nice and easy if we use a list of strings, we'll make it a mutable list of strings. So we'll say var let's call it lap times. Okay, and that is going to be a mutable list of string. It's going to start off empty. Okay. So there we go. We've got our lap times, and really, what I want to happen is when the user presses that floating action button, the first time they do it, it starts the timer off, and then if they press it again, it adds a lap time to the list. Okay. So we can, before we connect up our list view, we can go ahead and do that. Now you'll notice here we've got in onCreate we've got this fab, which is our floating action button. That's the idea of our little button, and it gives it an on-click listener. And at the moment, all it does is it creates something called a snack bar, which is like a little notification thing that can have an action attached to it, and it will pop that up. And at the moment, it will say replace with your own action. So if we want to see that, and then it shows it, so it creates it and it shows it. So if we want to see that in practice, we could run our app and have a quick look. Okay, so here's my floating action button that we changed from an email to a plus. If I click it, this is this snack bar popping up, and it lasts for a particular amount of time. At the moment, there's no action associated with it, so it doesn't do anything. Well, actually, all I want is a little message that pops up. I don't need any action for it, just to say that the timer has started. Or if the timer's already running, then we want to start sort of putting some items in the list. So let's think about how we might do that. How do we know if the timer started, and how do we go about doing a timer anyway? Okay, does anyone know if there's a way of getting the amount of elapsed time in Java? Anyone got any ideas how we might do that? Yeah?
Can you do like, I don't know what it'd be in Kotlin, but like system get milliseconds?
Yeah, I think you might even got the syntax and exactly right. So we could say something like system. I think it might even be get. Yeah, I've written it down, so I will cheat and read it from what I've written. But it is current time millis. I think if we'd have started typing millis, it would have probably. Yeah, there you go. So that gives us the amount of elapsed time in milliseconds. I think since so either since 1970 or since the application. Let's find out. It's always useful to know. Yeah, since 1970, 1st of January 1970. Number of milliseconds that have passed since then. So if anyone's really bored, they could work out when it will stop working, because we'll run out of the space in the long integer. But it notes it's a long. Okay. So this will give us like elapsed time. Now, obviously, we don't want to start showing how many milliseconds have elapsed since 1970. We want to create like a new a time. So I think we're going to have to create some sort of like a start time. So we could say like var start time equals, and we'll set it to 0 for now. And this makes it like this is a long literal. Hopefully you remember that from last year. We could have done like long, and then I think we might have got away with doing that. Yeah, it would let us get away with that, but let's leave it with the L for now. Okay, so if they've clicked the button and it's the first time, we want them to set our like counter starting point at start time rather than have it 0. Okay, so we could do something like if start time is 0, then why is it not like that? Oh yeah, I need to check it against the long. Then we want to say that the start time is equal to the current start time. Otherwise, we probably want to put it into our collection. Okay, so add to lap times. Okay. We probably want to notify the user that we've done it. Okay, so snack bar is kind of a bit over the top for that. We can use something called a toast instead. So I'll comment out snack bar. We might come back to it. I don't know. Haven't decided. And we'll create a toast. So we can say something like val toast. This is like a little notification that pops up. People who've got Android phones know what toast is? Yeah? Yeah. So we can say like toast equals toast. And what's it want? Context. So the context is this. We used context last week. And then what else does it want? Come on, tell me what else you want. Or is it toast.make? Hold on. Toast.make. Yeah, make text, sorry. We still need the context though, which is this. And we want some text. So we'd say something like lap started. And then we need to give it a duration. So there's like long and short. So we can say length short, length long. I think short will do for now. That creates it, and then we can show it, and it will pop up. Okay, so we're getting there. Let's just check that kind of works. So the first time I do it, we should get a little toast pop up, but it should only do it once. Assuming I haven't made any mistakes, but I make mistakes a lot, so who knows. There we go, lap started. It should fade away, and it's not coming up again, so that's good. So the next thing we need to do is add some of those lap times to this list of strings. Okay, we're going to need to do a bit of formatting because really I want to show it so we've got minutes and seconds, seconds and milliseconds, but as it stands, it's just going to show milliseconds. Now we could do that, we'll do that to start with and then we'll tidy it up later. So we'll just say something like lap times dot add, and we have to give it an index, okay? Now we want to add it to the end of the list. So we can just use the length of the lap times array to get the position. So it should have like a length. Is it a length? Might be size. It's a size. And then we want to add a string. Now obviously at the moment my the elapsed time we haven't calculated. So that's the first problem. And the second problem is it's going to be a long. So let's calculate it first. So we can say something like val elapsed time. Doesn't seem to like my spelling. Oh, there we go. Elapsed time is going to be system.current millis, or time millis minus the start time. Okay, and then we need to add that as a string. So we should be able to do something like elapsed time dot to string. And we're lucky because we're using like Kotlin, so we don't have to, if we were using a primitive, we could obviously use a long class in Java, but we can do it fine in Kotlin without any problem. So that should add it to the list. That's all well and good, but we're still not actually configuring our list to show anything. So we've got this list here, but the list isn't attached to our list view in any way. Okay, we can just put stuff in it, but nothing's going to happen. So how do we go about getting that that all set up? Well, we know we need this kind of array adapter thing. So let's create an array adapter. So we can say something like val. Oh, you're over there. I'm over here. Oh no, we're still in our on-click listener. Let's be careful here. That's the closing brace for our on-click listener. So we say so val array adapter equals array adapter. And then we specify the type. So this is going to be an array adapter of strings. Okay, obviously if it's a different type, then we specify a different type there. And then we want to go and construct it. We need a context, so we can use this. We need some sort of resource. Okay, well the resource is the type of item that is shown in the list view. As I said in the slides, there are some predefined layouts. Okay, now the anything other than the single text view, which is this one here, requires us to like implement the list view interface ourselves by subclassing array adapter. I really don't want to do that extra work, so we're going to use this predefined layout of android.r.simple layout list item 1. Okay, so that's already available to us. I'll see if I can remember it. Android.r. No, I've forgotten. What was it? Simple layout dot simple list item 1. Let's just check that is right. Yep. Okay. So and then it needs to know what it wants. So we've got the adapter sort of says, okay, we'll connect up this data source with the layout. Okay. And as I say, if we're using a list of strings and we're using this simple list item layout, we don't have to do any extra work. We don't have to subclass array adapter. Okay. If we wanted to connect anything else up, we'd have a bit more work to do. We'd have to like subclass array adapter. So with this, I can just pass in my list of strings, which is called lap times. Okay, and it should put them in. Okay, now it won't. We can run it. We shouldn't get an error. Well, actually, we then need to tell our list view what its array adapter is. So we'll do that, but it still won't do what we want it to do. So we're going to say list view dot adapter equals array adapter. Okay, but it shouldn't crash, but it should still not work, and we'll investigate why it won't appear to work once we've seen that it doesn't. Okay, lap started. Now it should at least be adding items to that list, and our array adapter is connected up. But actually, it's not like intelligent enough to sort of observe the collection. We actually have to tell it that the collection has changed every time we add something. So it'd be all well and good if we started off with some things in our list. So, you know, if I'd have done mutable list of strings and I'd whacked in some strings into that list. So let's say ABC, DEF, GHI. Okay, the list has already got some things in. We should now see that appear, and it's a good way of testing it. If it doesn't, who knows what I've done wrong, but let's hope for the best. Yeah, okay, so we've got those items in, but the ones that I'm adding programmatically, they're not coming, they're not appearing. Okay, so what we have to do is, whenever we change this collection, we've got to notify the array list that the list view that the data has been updated. Okay, so we tell the adapter, sorry, not the list, the adapter. So we say array adapter. Why is it not? Okay. So we've got another problem here, which we need to think about. Okay, I'm declaring my array adapter here, and I'm specifying it as a member of the list view there. But really, I want to be able to like call something on array adapter. Now I could do it this way. List view dot adapter. Okay, but if we want a reference to our adapter, so we can call it directly, we can declare this elsewhere. So I'm going to take that here, I'm going to cut it, and I'm going to pop it up here. Okay. But this is going to be a problem when I come to instantiate it, because it will try and do it before we've got a context, because it will do this before onCreate is called. So if we run it now, it should crash. Let's have a quick look and see it crash. It better crash. It's more annoying when things work and you expect them not to. Come on. That's helpful. It's not even run. Let's try again. Why am I not seeing the output? It's not running, but I want to see some output for it to tell me why. And it should tell me. Yay, here we go. Right. So let's have a look at the error. It's like, what's going on? System services not available to activities before onCreate. Do we get any more information? Unable to instantiate activity. Okay. And hopefully it will give us a line 20. Here we go. So we're trying to instantiate this, but this is not available because this only becomes available in onCreate. Okay. So what can I do to fix that? Okay. Well, I could instantiate it here, but then it's going to complain that, right, so this is an array adapter. So if I just do that, and then cut that from there, okay, we have to make it a variable. And then we could say something like, after onCreate, be careful here, if we're trying to do it before onCreate, and after set content before. If we try to do it before these methods, we're going to have problems, but if we do it after, it'll be fine. We can do something like array adapter equals, okay, we're doing some, okay, I thought they were input already, but added some imports. But we've still got a problem here, that the property is not initialized. Now, I don't really want to make it null because I know it's going to get created because we're always going to call onCreate for our activity, okay? So we're kind of, this is almost where Kotlin's sort of null safety is fighting against us and saying, you know, it can't be null, but it isn't null, okay? And we can use a special keyword to like say, I know it's null here, but what I'm going to do, I will initialize it at some point later. It's kind of like a promise. So we use a keyword late init. Okay, and this should go away. What am I missing? I've not synced it to null either. But that alone wouldn't do it. What is it saying? What? Oh, no, hold on. Why is it complaining? Oh, we're not specifying what type it is. It's a type of string. Ah. Come on. Okay, there we go. Just to prove it was still complaining. So even though we got that bit, we had it wrong before. It's not initialized, if we say late init, it will initialize it. Now, obviously, you could just abuse this. You could think, okay, that's fine. I don't have to worry about Kotlin's null safety. I could just write late init and all my variables and you know, like use them like normal and just get null pointer exceptions all over the place. Obviously, that's not what's intended. Okay. Oh, good point. We could make it private. In fact, we can make all these private. And we should, because no point making something public if we don't need to. Okay, so all well and good. We've now got our array adapter, okay, and we can access it whenever we need to. And what I need to do here is to tell the array adapter that we want to, or that we've changed the data set. So we can do like notify dataset change. Now you'll notice there are other methods, so we could like tell it that we've added an object or so on and so forth. And we'll, again, when we come to look at array adapters, sorry, not array adapters, recycler views, we'll probably do things a bit better in terms of how we're doing it. But we can get away with doing like notify dataset changed. Okay, so what should happen now is that the array adapter will be like, oh, okay, it's changed. Let's update the list view, which it's attached to. So all being well, as long as I haven't screwed up again, we should see that working. I have left in, ooh, okay, let's see what's going on. Oh no, that would start, I only pressed it once. There we go. So we're getting some output. Obviously I've left in my other things. And as I say, these are just milliseconds. So obviously there were 9 seconds before I pressed it the first time and 16 to here. So let's tidy that up a bit. Let's, for one, get rid of the initial data that appears. And two, let's go ahead and sort of kind of tidy up the how the elapsed time is printed. Okay, so that should be reasonably simple. We can split the milliseconds and seconds. Okay, so how do I go about getting a calculation for the seconds? So if I say seconds equals, how would I go about working out the number of whole seconds that have elapsed? So I'd sort out the milliseconds separately. How do I get the whole seconds? Yeah, divide by 1,000. So we can say elapsed time divided by 1,000. Okay, and then we can say val milliseconds. How do I do this one? Yes, but I only want, because I'm going to show seconds and then a colon and then the milliseconds. So I don't want to show like, let's say it's got to like 11 seconds and 500 milliseconds. I don't want to do 11 colon 11,500. I want 11 colon 500. So I want to like have the seconds, the full seconds removed from my milliseconds. How might I do that? Well, we could sort of do seconds times 1,000 and then remove that. Yeah, but that'd be a bit kind of messy, long-winded. Not that long-winded. What we could simply do is just get the remainder when we divide it by 1,000. Yeah. So if we do elapsed time, divide by 1,000, get the remainder. Yeah. Yeah. So yeah. So we've got the seconds and milliseconds. I want to put them together as a string, so I might want to say something like val lap time equals, and that's a string, and we can use our string templates to say seconds. Okay, this is not going to be quite perfect yet, and we'll see why in a minute. Milliseconds. Oh no, come on, give me $sign. There we go. Okay, and then we could add instead of adding the elapsed time, we add the lap time. And let's have a look at that. It's not going to be great. It's going to be a bit better, but you'll notice some improvements that could be made. So we start off our timer, and then we go, okay, looks fine. I'm gonna struggle here to get it to do what I want. Come on. This is being really unfortunate because I want to get it like there we go. No. Come on, I need to get it so that it's like at the start of a. There we go. Oh, where's it gone? Here we go at the bottom. Can you see 2616? Now really we want kind of like 3 decimal places in here, 2544. Yeah. That's kind of, you would really expect to see 044. Okay, anyone remember from last year how we can fix that? Yeah, good work. How do we format it? And remember, we can use with great difficulty. It shouldn't be great difficulty. Does anyone remember the name of the class that we can use? I think it is I don't know if there is a formatter. There's definitely a well, there is a formatter class. Last year we used decimal formatter. I know how to do it with decimal formatter. We could see what formatter will give us and try it if we like. If this doesn't work, we'll use decimal formatter. So let's try val formatter equals, I don't know, formatter. Does it take any parameters? Java.util.formatter? Yeah, let's import that. So with decimal formatter, we did something like formatter.format. Okay, we can give it format and some arguments, which are variable arguments, or a locale. I'm not sure this will work, but let's just see what happens. Or we could read we could read the documentation. I don't think it's going to work, but we'll try and use the format that we used last time. So, in fact, actually, it wants a string, so that's not going to work. Our format method requires a string. With a format and some arguments. Well, let's try it. So, if we're using a decimal formatter, we could say we want exactly 4 digits or 3 digits. I think I want, and then we'd pass in possibly what it is that we wanted formatted, which is our milliseconds. And then we'd do something like, let's swap this around, or let's put this in a val millis string. If not, if this doesn't work, we'll just use a decimal formatter, and we call this millis string. Let's just see. I have no idea whether this will work. I don't think it's working somehow. Let's swap it for decimal formatter. Decimal format class. And obviously the method is slightly different. So formatter dot we need to give it the pattern, which is there. Maybe I should have done that with the formatter. I didn't look, but maybe we can explore later. And then we can just say the formatter can format, and here we can pass in a number, which can be a long, which is our milliseconds. Okay, and we keep that as millistring. So all being well now, it should work. So lap started. Okay, so I've made one mistake. What's my mistake? Extra 0, yeah. So we only want 3. Okay. Now there is one other problem. I won't restart it, and that is when we get to the bottom, they just kind of go off screen and disappear, and the only way I can see them is scrolling, which is kind of annoying. Okay. Now we could put the new ones at the top, and maybe that might be the better idea. But just so we know that we can actually get the list to scroll to where we want to, we can do that as well. Okay. A list view has a method called set selection. So what we could then do is this point it says something like list view dot set selection, and that will essentially select an item at position. How do I know what position? Well, it's the essentially the index of the last item in my collection. Well, my collection is called where has it gone? Lap times. So I should be able to say something like lap times. We've got to be careful not to use size, because size will be one more. But fortunately, there is a last index method. So we could do size -1, but last index does that for us. So, why do more work than we need to? So all being well, if we restart it, we should get our decimal formatting right. Our lap starts. Decimal formatting is right. You can obviously see the time in lap time. It's not technically lap time, is it? Is it split time? But actually, we're scrolling down the list as we're adding them in, and we can see, oh, it stopped working. That's bizarre. How odd. I don't know why that worked and then stopped working, and no, it doesn't even want to scroll. I don't know if that's a bug or something in the emulator. It's jumping about. How odd. I'll explore that. It kind of was working and now doesn't want to work. I don't know if it's a bug. I'll restart it properly. I think I did the quick restart option. It was working, and then it stops working. How bizarre. Okay, I'll look into that. I'm not sure why that's... No, because we need it... yeah, this should tell it that it's changed, and then this should select it. I think if we did it the other way around, it might get confused. Because we should tell the array adapter that the list of lap times has changed. There is a very, very, very subtle error there. I've spotted it. Can anyone spot it? What is it that if we try and explain, what have I tried to do? Or what should I have tried to do? I want to set the selection to be the last item in my collection. Yeah? My collection is called lap times. Yeah? What have I got the last index of? Lap time, yeah. So that's interesting because, well, what is lap time? It's actually just a string, but obviously string is a collection in itself, and therefore it has a last index. So what it was doing, it was trying to get to the last item when it was maybe 4, and probably putting that sort of near the top of the list. But once we got past that, it couldn't do that anymore. So if we change this to lap times, we should see our error disappear. Because obviously that string never got longer than, well, when we got to 10 seconds, it would have come to like 6 characters, but we can see it's working now. So, subtle error, easily missed. Okay, so it's all well and good, but once I've launched my application, I can't like reset it or do anything like that with it. So it's kind of like a bit limited. So this is where menus become useful. So let's keep going. We've created an array adapter. We talked about lateness. Okay, so menus are great for doing things that we might want to do. That's a terrible statement I just made there, but anyway. We get a menu with the basic activity template by default, okay? So if we were to explore our project, if we looked in this menu folder within resources, we see this menu.main. And if we look at the text for it, I mean, you can kind of see it there. You can see it says settings, and there's this like action settings menu. And if you look at the text, all a menu is basically some XML with a list of items. In this case, there's only one item. You can specify an order, so it doesn't have to match the order that you put the items into the menu. And then you've got like a title and an ID. Okay. Well, I don't really want settings. What I'd like to do is to be able to reset my application, my stopwatch. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change it around, and I'm going to modify it so it's going to be called reset. But just before we do that, we might also want to have a look at what happens with the menu in the activity. So we got some sort of code out the box for our when we created this basic activity. Obviously, we've got this set up the action bar and what have you. We've added this code here for our little button. But we've also got this onCreateOptionsItem menu method, which inflates the menu, okay? So this basically adds, well, as it says here, adds the items to the action bar if it's present, okay? So if we were to take that out, that menu would disappear. And then we've got this onOptionsItem selected, okay? Now, this basically allows us to do something when the user chooses one of those optional items. Okay, so at the moment it doesn't do anything; it just returns true. Okay, but what we could do is we could add some sort of logic in here. Okay, now we could do like if we did basic syntax would be like if item ID equals r.id.action settings, and then we'd have some logic. We've got this, the when statement, and it's done that sort of fancy syntax where we return what comes out of the when statement, which in this case will be either true if we find the action settings, or it will call super. I think we have to return true if we handle that action in this method. Otherwise, it passes it like up the chain to the super class. Okay, so here it's saying, yeah, we're handling the action settings. Now, obviously, we're not doing anything with action settings. So if we were to look at our menu and click settings, nothing happens. Okay, we could do something here. In order to do a few things, we want to add a block of code. So I'm going to put some braces here, and then we could do something here like, I don't know, let's log. And there's different types of log for different categories. So depending on the severity. So if we look in this kind of this log output here, okay, you can see it's kind of going nuts because it's log stuff all the time. We've got this verbose, debug, info, warn, error, and assert. So there are different letters of log for what sort of output we got. So like error, I think is like the minimal output. Is assert? Yeah, we don't get much there. So you get warnings, you get a bit more. info you get so with info you get info and errors and warnings. With warnings you get warnings and errors. With errors you just get errors. Okay, so this is like you get limited amounts of the data, or we get more input by setting it to debug. So it's kind of like how much information do you want in this log? So rather amusingly, as well as having so we've got error information or whatever, verbose. There's also this WTF, which I'm sure you can figure out what it stands for. This shows up in all of the different log settings, so we'll use this for whatever. And we need to give it something called a tag. Okay, so we might say that this is what it's relating to. This is our main activity. So we say main activity, and then we give it a message, like menu pressed. Okay, so we haven't talked about logging. We don't get print line and things like we do if we're working in the command line. So we can use the log if we want to log stuff. We probably shouldn't be using that, but anyway, at least it will work. So let's run it again. And if we put this on error, which it is on error, okay, so we get minimal output here, although you do see some things popping up. Application should launch, and if we hit here we go. We can see our application. Here's our error. Our tag is main activity, and we've got this thing that says we press the menu. Okay, so we can see that's working. So you could put our own code there. So I'm going to we could leave it as settings, but I think it makes more sense to say reset. So we'll go into our menu here. We'll change this to action underscore reset, which is the ID. We'll change the title. Okay, I'm going to delete that one there. I'm going to say reset. It'll complain because it's not a string resource, so I can extract a string resource and make it string reset. And then if I go back to my main activity, we'll have an error here, hopefully. Okay, it still thinks it exists, but never mind. Oh, it's gone yellow now. So we can do action, what do I call it? Reset. Okay, and then what happens when we reset it? What needs to happen? We need to clear out all the items in our collection. We need to tell the list or the adapter that we've changed the data set, and we need to restart or reset back to 0 our start time. Okay, so we could do all of that. So start time equals 0. We can remove all the items from our list, which is called lap times. There's a clear method that gets rid of them all. Just be careful here. There's a remove all method, and you might think, well, that should do the same thing, but that actually allows you to provide, presumably, by the looks of things, some sort of condition that will remove all that match a particular, you can specify a predicate. So you might remove all things that meet some sort of particular criteria, but we just want to get rid of everything, so we're going to use clear. And then we need to tell the adapter that the data set's changed. So array adapter dot notify data set changed. Okay, so all being well, that will reset it. There's almost enough code here that I might sort of put it extract into a method maybe if I was being good, but I can't be bothered, so I won't. Let's try it again. So start a timer, check it's working, and then we should be able to find that if we hit reset, we're back to the beginning, and the first time we press it, the lap starts, and we're off again. Okay, so we can just, if we want to add more items to the menu, we can simply go into our menu XML, and we can add more items. They will appear. We can determine sort of how they appear, so there's these options like show as action. I think that puts it on the bar without being in a like a little drop-down menu, and you can give them icons and things like that as well. So you'll see that in the task for today. So that's all well and good. What happens, however, if I accidentally press the lap button and get a timing I don't want? I'd like to be able to actually delete things from the menu. So to do that, we can create a context menu. Okay, so I think this is on the slide as well. Yeah, so we need another menu for this. So I'm going to add another menu to my resources, and then we can, once we've got our menu, we can register something to show that menu. So there's a method called register for context menu, and we can ask our list view to have that context menu. Okay. Obviously, again, with the menu, we could have multiple items. So in this case, I'm only going to put one in because I just want to delete. But we could have a long press menu that does lots of different things. Okay. So let's try that. Let's add a menu resource. If we right click on menu and do new, we get a nice menu resource file. Lovely. I'll call it, what's the naming convention? To do menu underscore context. I think that matches the convention they've used. And then, you can configure these for like different kind of layouts and stuff, but again, I'm not fussed about that. So I'll OK that. So here's my menu. I want to add some items to it. Again, we could do it in the designer, like you could just like add a menu item. Alternatively, you can add it here. Let's do it this way, because again, it's probably quicker. So drag it in there, pops up as a menu item. We can give it a title, which is going to be delete. We can give it an ID. Again, we probably want to stick to things. So this is like action reset. So I might call it like context delete. And again, we could give it as an icon. And I think that will do the job. So let's have a quick look. We've got an ID and a title. I think that's all we need. Okay. So we've got to register that menu. So like we say here, we need to register the view for the context menu. So we can do that in onCreate. So we go back to activity. And again, after we've done all our setting up and creating, we can say something like ListView dot register. Was it register? No. It's the menu we want to register. Let's go back to my slides. It should just work. Register for context. Oh, there we go. Register for context menu. And then what do we want to register for the context menu? Well, we want to register that the list view can handle it. Okay. That's still not going to do anything. Okay. We need to add some more methods to set things up. So you see here, we had this sort of onCreate options menu. Okay. There's a similar method. Anyone like to guess what it's called? So that was our options menu. We're creating a context menu. Yeah. So it's not rocket science. Anyone like to guess what we might have to do in onCreate context menu? Yeah. And what's the resource? Well, what did I call it? Menu context. And we just pass in the menu that is the parameter from the view. The method. Okay, so that should create the context menu. Now, we've got a method called onOptionsItemSelected. Anyone like to take a guess as to what the method is called for when we have a context item being selected? So I like your thinking, but it's just that we've called, the name we've given it is deleted. It doesn't actually know what we want to do, and there could be other items on it. So this is just for the here. So we had, if you think we had, where has it gone? onCreate options menu. We created onCreate context menu. On here we've got on options item selected. So yeah, on context item. Oh no, that's not what I wanted. On context item selected. You can even hook into when the menu's closed and all sorts. Okay, so what do we do here? Well, we write some code to check whether the ID matches. Now, obviously, we've only got one context menu, so there's only one thing that they could select, but it's probably a good idea to actually check they've selected the right thing. We could write this when statement just to show you another way of doing it. We could say something like if item.id is equal to the whatever we've called it, which would be something like r.id.context delete. Yeah, there we go. That's what we called it. Now note that the item can be null, so we'd have to do something like that, a safe call. If item's null, I don't know why it would be null, but it could be. Unreachable code. Where is that? Oh, good spot, thank you. Yes, we don't want to do that. Okay, we are handling it here, so at the end of this method we say return true because we're handling it, but we've got extra space. What do I do here? Well, this is where it gets a bit tricky because I need to know which item in my list view I want to delete. Okay, so we can get like some info related to the menu item using item.menuinfo. So you can do like item.menuinfo. Okay, that will give us some information, but in order to be able to get the information we want, which is its position, okay, we need to cast it as what type it will be. And because it's from an array adapter, there's something called an adapter view, and that's the type of adapter type of menu info it is. So we have to do something like what should we call it? Val list item menu info. It's probably the most accurate way of describing it. And then we have to cast it. So we have to say it is an adapter view dot, I get this right, adapter context menu info. Yeah, it's not straightforward. But once we've got that, this list item menu info will have a position, okay, and that will relate to the index position that the user has done the right click press on the item in the collection. Okay, so now we've got an idea of which button they pressed. Okay, this is a bit horrific to have to do that, but that's Android for you. Okay, so I can do something with it. So let's say something like var index equals, and then it's now pretty straightforward. We can go to our collection, which is called lap times. We can say remove at and pass in the index, and then we can say adapter dot, or array adapter dot notify dataset changed. All being well, that will work. Let's try it out. There's a fairly good chance I'll have cocked up again. So let's have a look. So all being well, I should be able to do a long press, which is a context menu. Our context menu appears. If I click it, I clicked on 1605. Yes, it does work, and it deletes it. Okay. Oh yeah, we've just looked at this. So we've over in the onCreate context menu. Yeah, so there's a good point. If you've got multiple context menus, you might want to inflate them all in all reality. But you should be doing these checks to make sure you've got the right item. We can use this when clause, like we've got the example here, so we can use this return when. This is neater, but when you're not used to it, this is probably easier to understand. But either way, you can use either of them. And don't forget to do what I did and make sure that you don't try and write the code after the return statement. And if you handle it, when you handle a menu item, return true. Okay, that's it for the lecture bit. Questions?
How did you change the envelope to a plus sign and a button?
Yep, okay. So if we go back to our activity, okay, and we look in here, we've got this sort of thing that points to an icon. Now, we can either change it here. So it was, I think, something like IC email. So I just went back and started typing IC and had a look at what was available. So these are all drawable assets that are built into the Android library. So we can pick a different one. So I don't know, let's look at month and see what that looks like. Can we see that? Let's just run it and see if we can see it. Now, obviously, if we were going to, if we wanted to choose our own image, we would have to add that into our resources. We will cover that briefly, how to add resources after Christmas, because we do one where I couldn't find an icon that was kind of useful. So I've created some icons and we drag them in. So we ended up having to create, you have to create different sizes for different resolutions of screen and things like that. So there you go. Oh yeah, that's like a calendar and a 31. You can just about, can I zoom in on that? Zoom in again, and then scroll. Can I scroll? No, there's some scroll bars. Yeah, you can just about see. There you go. Yeah, we can change it. So again, whether we can change it here, a little drop down, drawable. I've not really played with this, but yeah, you can see some of them. So we've got like a star or a delete. Here's our input add. I think that's one we had before, wasn't it? A little plus. Is there anything that's better for a lap time? Kind of want like a stopwatch, but I suspect that there's not a stopwatch. We could use a save icon or something, I guess. So yeah, you can preview the ones that are there. I don't think I can see anything that's particularly more useful for quite what we wanted to do. But yeah, so there's basically a gallery of things that we can use from that we get from Android.